in India, giving new power to the young creatives to take an active role in doing this while playing out new forms of social mobility. So I think these films provide us with the only guide we have to the changes within India's new middle classes today. And I think studying these films, we learn much more about the films themselves, as well as the new emerging India. And I just want to show you a couple of clips, if I can now, to show what I mean by this. And this is also much more fun than listening to me. So, is that okay? Okay, I'm going to start off with a clip which I think really typifies the Bollywood aesthetic. This is meant to be how Indians celebrate Diwali.
Can we organize something here for the sound system so that we can hear the sound from the clips? And I don't think the other mic is working. All right. But then we're getting the feedback. So, but we need two mics anyway. Let's see if we can get it organized by the end of the talk. Then we'll show these clips all together at the end. Thank you, Rachel. That was a very interesting talk, and especially because I think we seldom realize that this sort of umbrella term Bollywood has so many cinemas within it. And, you know, for instance, as you pointed out, you delineated the regional cinema, which is the Bhojpuri cinemas, and the Hatke, or offbeat multiplex cinemas, and then, of course, mainstream Bollywood. I think that is very instructive, that separation. We'll move on to Javed Jabbar's talk and then come back to questions.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, Meena. Thank you. You will be spared, unfortunately, an attempt to show anything visual. You'll have to suffer me. Please close your eyes and listen to my voice and fall asleep while I'm speaking to you. But it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Amina Sayyed, for this invitation. And it's very stimulating to listen to Rachel. How refreshing to see that there's such insightful, thoughtful research being done in London at SOAS on the Indian cinema. I wish, hopefully, similar research will be done into Pakistani cinema. I've had some connection with SOAS, Rachel. My son Kamal Jabbar survived SOAS and did his law with honors there and is a barrister. He's there. Shabnam and Mehreen, alas, we are missing. Zainab, who bravely continues to support Kamal, she's there. But it's such a pleasure to see all of you, and an editorial couple right in front, and Rubab Haider there. Such inspiring faces. They should all be on the Pakistani cinema screen. We have such handsome faces who have not yet been introduced to Pakistani cinema. But where do we begin with Pakistani cinema? Well, first of all, the title of this panel, calling it Lollywood's Pakistan, I beg to disagree, only because it tends to be very restrictive. This is a literature festival, and Lollywood is too confining and judgmental a term to try and understand or even get a glimpse of what Pakistani cinema is all about. And I have interpreted it not from Lollywood's Pakistan, but because this is a literature festival, the possible connection between Pakistani print literature and Pakistani cinema. And I say print literature because the Oxford English Dictionary still defines literature straight away, no qualifications, written works. And I congratulate the British Council and the Oxford University Press for expanding the definition. And they should ask the Oxford English Dictionary to publish a new edition, because literature, according to them, now includes the spoken word, which is as it should be. What is literature? Yes, literature is classically, traditionally printed work of great artistic merit that survives several generations, becomes literature. But after the 20th century, and especially beginning with the 19th century, new media, there is so much that is not just in print. The spoken word on stage, the words sung in a song, as Asif Nurani so well illustrated, the populist film songs, which are so devalued, but they were popular literature. They've energized, they've expressed something that people feel in their hearts and their bones. And 50 years after a song has been composed, it can be heard in the pan shops of Chicha Watni and Korangi. That's literature at its finest. Literature that has gone beyond critics, beyond selected readers, and created a bond with people. So literature is multidimensional, literature is multimedia. It's no longer just print. And print itself has become now available in non-print forms, in electronic forms, and in the Apple forms, the Apple applications of how to read a book electronically. So let us think of cinema also as part of literature. A good screenplay, an original screenplay, in my humble opinion, and not so humble opinion, because my screenplay for Beyond the Last Mountain is part of literature. At least I think so, no one else thinks so, but I think so. Anything that tries to reflect reality and tries to portray something, and irrespective of whether 10 people see it or one person sees it, popularity is not a certificate for something becoming literature. Truth is, the search for truthfulness, and who decides whether something is truthful or not is also an unknown question. But that's the great thing about literature. And also the juxtaposition of literature with cinema is another irony. A literature in the conventional sense is the act of supreme creation by a single mind. One human being working in his room or working out in the field, painting a canvas or composing poetry or writing a novel. That's all one mind. And there is the cinema, the antithesis of individuality. Even though directors and writers, of course, you cannot begin a film without a good screenplay. It takes 10 months, 1 year, 2 years to write a good screenplay. And the screenplay writers still get very little credit. It's the director who gets the credit. And of course, in the case of Mehreen Jabbar, she deserves all the credit, and she should always get the credit. But that's because she also works on the screenplay. But it is so collaborative. There are 100 people determining what a single shot is going to look like with one human being on that screen. And 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when we were filming Ramchand Pakistani, it brought home to me again this beauty and the paradox of cinema. We are trying to capture Nandita Das against this arid backdrop, solitary splendor, and there are 83 people. Probably 13 of them shouldn't have been there, but as the poor producer, I had to pay for them. 83 people helping make that single shot possible. And that hopefully 50 years from now will be rated as part of literature. But can collaborative art become literature? That's a question which I think, well, Citizen Kane, which was not based on a novel, is a great classic, the work of an original mind, and juxtaposed with Gone with the Wind, directly taken from literature and made beautifully, and you never tire of seeing that film. So Literature cannot claim a monopoly on creating good cinema. It can certainly help, it can certainly inspire, but looking at Pakistani cinema's origins, the search for Pakistani cinema, I think, begins equivalent to the search for Pakistan's identity after 1947, August 47. What was Pakistani cinema supposed to do? Was it supposed to be a clone of the Mumbai or Bombay film? Because already films were being made in Lahore before August 1947. And after August 1947, of course, Pakistan had many more problems to worry about than making films. But to the great credit of Pakistan, beginning with 1950 or thereabouts, for the first 15 to 18 years, we did produce films that tried to reflect this weird, bizarre country's search for identity, to be Pakistani and not be Indian. And not very easy to do because you had a song and dance formula. Romance had to be the key theme of every Pakistani film. But within that limitation, with the help of Ejaz Gul, who's a very well-informed critic, as you know, based in Islamabad, I identified at least 10 films made in the 60s, 70s, which tried to do justice to the connection between Pakistani literature and Pakistani cinema, beginning with Naila, if you remember. Many of us are obviously under 30 here, people like Javed Iqbal and myself. We are touching 26 just now. So we remember Naila very well. Naila was a great film based on Razia Bhatt's novel. And those who are not familiar with Razia Bhatt from the slightly older generation, please go back and discover her. Aakhri Station, Surur Bara Bankvi's book based on Hajra Masroor's Pagli novelette, about a woman who is raped. Shabnam, the actress from East Pakistan, portrayed it very well. 1965, then 1966, Badnaam, Manto's short story Jhumke became a very commercially successful as well as artistically well-received film, Badnaam. And then there was also Saikha in 1968, based on, again, Razia Bhatt's novel. So there were these courageous attempts by different directors and writers to do justice to the Pakistani search for identity and expressed through cinema. And then in 1970, there was Varis Shah's Heer Ranjha, and a remarkable coincidence with Bombay, because in that very year, Chetan Anand, Dev Anand's elder brother, made a version of Heer Ranjha featuring his wife Priya, which was entirely poetry-based, verse-oriented. There was no conventional prose dialogue, whereas Pakistan's Heer Ranjha, which was a straightforward dialogue-based film, made another approach. In 1972, there was Umrao Jan Ada. We led India. Obviously, in the opinion of many, the 1981 version of Umrao Jan Ada by Muzaffar Ali in India was a far better version. And yet, there is a refreshingly large number of Pakistanis who think that the Pakistani Umrao Jan Ada was a great film to witness. Then 1975, Ek Guna Aur Sahi, based on Manto's story Mummy, did moderately well at the box office, was critically well received. Muthi Bhar Chawal in 1978, based on Rajinder Singh Bedi, an Indian writer. Ek Chadar Maili Si, done with courage by Sangeeta, a woman who had done Society Girl previously as a director. And then in 1979, the most non-violent, peaceful film called Maula Jat, which you might remember, which epitomized all the fine virtues of Punjab and Pakistan. They're such misunderstood people, based on Ahmad Nadeem Qasmi's short story Gandasa. And that, of course, represented a turning point of a certain kind. 1979 was Khak Aur Khoon, based on Naseem Hijazi's novel about the struggle for independence. It went way over budget. It was financed by the National Film Development Corporation, directed by Masood Pervez. And the last one I want to refer to in this list is Dehleez, not written by a Pakistani, adapted from Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, which has been adopted almost by South Asia as a rich source, because in India they did Dil Diya Dard Liya. Earlier they did Hal Chal. So Emily Bronte is as much South Asian as she is British or English. But those were 10 films. Yet, remarkably enough, Pakistani cinema's failure was that then when this beleaguered, bewildering, crazy country disintegrated in 1971, not a single film was made to try and portray why this incredible country broke up. One would have thought that whether it is even in scholarship, there has been a great paucity. It was only belatedly that people like Hassan Zahir, who wrote The Separation of East Pakistan, or Witness to Surrender by Siddiq Salek, which was only about the breakup of that December, that tragedy of 1971. But a historical portrayal of how a country only 24 years old became the first nation state to disintegrate after the Second World War, Pakistani cinema just said that's a no-go area. And that kind of signified the poverty of the state's attitude to enabling cinema to do justice to reality. And that is where Indian policies have been much more enlightened. Grudgingly, as a most unreasonable Pakistani, I have to admit that India's state policies towards cinema have been much more progressive and encouraging of dissenting viewpoints from the mainstream. And that is reflected in the weird decision taken after the 65 war with India, when we banned the import and exhibition of Indian films in Pakistani cinema houses. That was a terrible, fateful step into the regressive mold. Because before